Okay, I believe this is where I left you last week. Basically, I screwed this thing up, and now we have to figure out if we can fix it. Okay, let's get started. Now, when it comes to doing the transition between your neck profile and your headstock or the heel, there's no real right or wrong way to do it. You just kind of sketch on the shape that you're going for and just remove material until you get there. Really, just, chisel, file, sandpaper, whatever you have. Just keep going until it looks right. And obviously I did a volute here, transitioning to the headstock, and that's not necessary. I just did it because I think it looks cool, but it does add a little bit extra work. All right, so I am starting to feel good about this again. Our profiling looks really good up here around the volute. And then down here, the vast majority of those gouges got profiled out just like I thought they would. I still have a little bit of a gouge right here, and I could go even thinner and make it disappear entirely because there's enough meat to do that, but I don't want to. I really like where the profile is at right now, and I'm going to leave it. So a couple of ways we could disguise that. One, we could just put in some wood filler there. Of course, that's going to be very visible if we do a transparent finish, which I want to do because of this beautiful flame maple. The other option, like I mentioned, I could sand it all out smooth. The third option is what I'm going to go with, and I'm very excited, but I will clue you in on that later. Since the profile's done and I'm feeling good about this neck, we're going to go ahead and start working on the other stuff. So we still have our center line here. And I'm guesstimating right about here is the depth of our truss rod. So we're going to go ahead and start drilling. Perfect. Just about the perfect angle too. All right, perfect access. True story. Getting ready to prep this thing so that we can flatten it and then radius it. And I got out my straight edge and I checked, and I am perfectly straight. It's set for a very slight forward bow. And so just a little, now that I undug my truss rod access, I can just give this a little eighth of a turn. So now this is perfectly flat. In fact, this is flat enough that I could actually use this neck as a fretless neck. And so that's kind of testimony to the whole clamp it down to a known flat surface while you're gluing. That's going to make your fretboard surface perfectly flat. Now, that being said, if you get to this stage in your neck building, and it's possible that in the meantime stuff might have twisted or bowed and you can't fix it with your truss rod, you will need to flatten this. And so what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to go ahead and slack the truss rod just so I can show you guys what to do in that situation. So to flatten it, back to our known flat surface, put down a little masking tape, now a little bit of super glue, and because I'm impatient, a little bit of accelerator. Make sure you press that nice and good. This is 120 grit sandpaper, but now we take our neck and a pencil and we just shade it in. So it's important you shade your pencil all the way across. That way, it's going to reveal any like dips or valleys or low spots across your fretboard, not just in the center. And now, you guessed it, we're just going to flip it. And without any outside pressure, we're just going to sand. Side to side, front to back. Make sure we get all of those low spots down level. So you can see the two spots, again, because I told you I had a slight bow, it's taking off a little bit of the pencil down here at the base and up here at the top. The majority is probably going to be taken out up here at the top because the bow was further up here. So once I remove some material, it's going to start pulling away all of this. Now, the reason why I say to do it this way as opposed to flipping it over and doing it with a sanding beam, you can do it with a sanding beam, absolutely, but a sanding beam is a lot harder to apply pressure to sand without bowing the neck, because even just the weight of your sanding beam, if it's heavy enough, can cause the neck to flex. This way, we're only allowing gravity and the natural shape of the neck to do the contact with the sandpaper. All right, so now our fretboard, fingerboard is perfectly flattened. As you can see, I put my pencil scribbles back on it again. And now it's time to radius the fretboard. And if you don't have any tools specifically for fretboard radiusing, that's okay. You have a few options. Option number one is you could leave it flat with no radius. That's how classical guitars are. And even some high-end shredding guitars have 0 radius. People say that having no radius is much faster, actually. And some people think it's more comfortable. I personally like at least a subtle radius on it. So another thing you can do, you can head back to your known flat sanding spot and place it face down and just put some pressure on one edge, sand for a bit, and then slowly roll it across to the other edge. You could do that. It's not an exact science, but you can put a nice curve radius on there. And I'm going to let you in on a secret. It doesn't have to be perfect. The only thing that really matters is that it's consistent the entire length of the fretboard. And so if you put it on a flat surface and you're sanding back and forth like this and rolling, then you are going to have it consistent the entire length of your fretboard. And so that would work just fine, even for a fretless instrument. If you want to be more exact than that, some people are very particular about their radius. They want a 9.5 inch or 12 inch radius or something like that. You can make a jig for your router. If you've been following along up to this point and you have a router, then you can build yourself a router jig where you can place this over it with your router in it, and you can route it and slowly adjust your radius as you go across, right? And it doesn't require any special tools. It just requires you to make a jig for a tool that you already have. And as you can see, I made this out of particle board, just scrap wood I had laying around. I used a CNC to make it, but you don't need to. You could make one yourself easily without a CNC. The last option is just to invest in this. This is just a little radius sanding block. I've been trying to do this video without any luthier specific tools. All the tools that I've shown you up until this point are useful in other projects besides guitar building. This would not be. This is pretty much only good for building guitar necks. I mean, it's only 15 bucks. I'm gonna show you how you can get even more of your money's worth out of it a little bit later on. So this is the method that I'm gonna use. Even though I have the radius jig, I've done the masking tape and super glue method with some, I think this is 80 grit sandpaper, so it should be pretty productive, should go by pretty quickly. And then I'll peel that off and do 120, and then peel it off and do 220. And of course, the reason for doing the pencil mark is so that you know once you've sanded all the way to your center. You should just leave yourself a little sliver of pencil all the way down. That way you know you've not taken off too much in one spot, and you know that you've taken off the perfect amount for your radius. All right, did 80 and 120. Now we're up to 220. And this is gonna remove most of the pencil. Really what I'm interested in here is just getting out any scratches or gouges left by our heavier grits of sandpaper. All right, so this is the second time I've made a mistake like this. I really need to stop doing this. You're supposed to cut your fret slots before you radius your fretboard. Now, a 12-inch radius is a fairly flat radius, so I think I'm not going to have any issues, but it definitely makes it a lot easier if you're sawing on a flat surface as opposed to a radiused surface. To mark out our frets, I went ahead and just downloaded a PDF to scale of where I want to put my frets. It's the easiest way to do it. It doesn't require any special measuring tools. There are like calculators and stuff that will give you the exact measurements, but it's really hard to guess fractions of a millimeter on a meter stick. So it's way better to just print it off. So I use multiscale.info, and even if I wasn't doing a multi-scale fretboard, I would just punch in just the numbers for a standard scale and still print it off, just because I know I can print it off to scale, tape all the pieces together, and then we can do the masking tape and super glue trick, stick this on here, and I can just saw right through it on each fret. But this is another part of the builds where if you are, building one yourself as opposed to buying one off the shelf, you can have a little bit of creative freedom. And so I am doing a multi-scale, very subtle multi-scale. I found 34.25 inch to 33.75 inch multi-scale, so it's very subtle, only a 1/2 inch difference, which equates to 1/4 inch difference at your nut and your bridge. So I can use a standard bridge without having to worry about having compensated saddles for the multi-scale. And just that extra 1/2 inch, man, it does a world for string tension, especially if you play in drop tunings or in bead tuning like I do. I don't like floppy low strings. And so just this one mod right here, being able to have something that's truly custom to my taste, makes it worth all the extra work of making my own neck. All right, now that we're slotted and I see the angle up here of my nut, or this is actually probably going to be a 0 fret. It doesn't make sense to have this straight and this angled. So I'm gonna take a file or a chisel or something and just kind of shape that off at an angle to match that fret. All right, making a paper template of my neck pocket. Now tracing that paper template onto the heel of my neck. Now, probably the best tool for this is going to be the orbital sander. Oh yeah, much better. Those gouges were really deep, but I finally got them out. This neck is basically ready for the frets to be pressed in. And something that I like to do before I press in the frets is I like to put a coat of finish on it. But before I do that, we need to talk about the elephant in the room, this gouge here that I still haven't fixed. Now you can see it looks 1,000 times better. It's hardly noticeable. It's kind of hard to see on the camera, but we have this little blue stripe from the masking tape that's poked through where I put a little too much masking tape near the truss rod. So firstly, we're gonna hide the gouge by adding some texturing to the back of the neck. Now, lots of people talk about wanting to have a smooth, satin, fast playing neck, and those are great. That's how I typically make my necks. But I've seen people, I think maybe in the last year's Great Guitar Build-Off, somebody did like a textured pattern on the back of the neck that was really cool, and I've always wanted to try that. And so this mistake gives me an opportunity to try it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna measure off where the 8th fret is, and then I'm gonna start doing some subtle texturing there. And then once we get to the 12th fret, I'm gonna kind of double up on the texturing, and that will make this disappear. And then I'll slowly blend it into the heel of the neck. And so what that's gonna do is a couple of things. One, obviously, it's gonna hide my mistake. But more importantly, if you've ever played on a dark stage and you can't see your fret dots, which could be the case with this being a maple neck, I'm gonna do black fret dots. It's gonna be very hard to see on a dark stage. That will give you some tactile feedback for positioning where your hands are. You'll know where the texturing starts, that you'll be at the 8th fret, and you'll know where the texturing doubles up, that you're at the 12th fret. 8th and 12th fret are kind of the most common frets that you will need to find, and also the hardest to find on a dark stage, because you have no feedback up close to the heel or down close to the nut, where you can just feel the frets and count real quick which one you're on. And so that's gonna give us some tactile feedback there. And I've done this kind of texturing before, just not on a neck. I've done it on knife handle scales, and then more recently I did it on this PDR paddle that I made for a buddy of mine who does paintless dent repair work. And just did a little textured handle. And it's really smooth, it feels really good. I can't imagine this would slow down your playing. And so that's what we're gonna do here. I went ahead and put on a coat of Minwax Golden Oak, I believe, stain. And that just really brought out the flaming, which is what I was really hoping for. It also did the other thing that I was hoping for, and it dyed the tape that had worn through to a brown color instead of the blue color, which is what I wanted. I wanted it to blend in a little bit more. Now it looks a little bit less out of place. Obviously it's still very visible, but at least it's not blue, right? I mean, this is more believable that that's just, you know, an imperfection in the wood showing through or something. So I don't mind it at all. The stain also exaggerated my texturing, which I think looks super cool. And so I'm very happy with how this is coming. So now it's time to press in our frets. So if this is your first time making a guitar neck, I highly recommend you getting this type of fret wire. This is made by a brand called CB Giddy Crafter Supply. It's available on Amazon, so I'll put a link down in the description. This is Jescar Jumbo Nickel Silver fret wire. And I love this stuff because it's super just easy and beautiful to work with. It's pre pre-radiused, so no fret bending jig required. This is pre-radiused. This is jumbo tall, but it's not jumbo wide, and that's what I love most about this Just Guard Jumbo, is that it's just super easy to work with because it's plenty tall, just in case you need to knock it down when you're leveling it. You got plenty of room to work with. Plus, because it's not super wide, it levels, crowns, and polishes really easily. It also cuts really easily if you are using non-luthier specific cutters, like these Walmart brand Hyper Tough diagonal cutters, which is what I'm going to show you can use today. You don't need to have like these StewMac luthier specific fret end nippers. The way I do this is I just line up, you can see I already have a few frets that I had already cut, but I just lined it up on the fret slot so that it aligns on one side, and then I measure where it needs to be cut on the other side. And then I just take my diagonal cutters and it cuts it honestly very clean. Every bit as clean as the StewMac version. And so then I could just place that on there. Now, the one downside to using these Hyper Tough cutters or any diagonal cutters is that they probably are going to struggle with stainless steel frets. And right now I'm using nickel silver, again, just because it's easy and it's beautiful to work with, but eventually want to start doing stainless steel frets. So I ended up ponying up for these StewMac fret end nippers because I do eventually want to be able to do stainless steel frets. And if you want to do stainless steel frets, you're going to need these too. Unfortunately, these are like 40 or 50 bucks and these are like $3, right? But having a good set of flush cut nippers is very helpful. While it is a luthier specific tool, you will find that you use these a ton in lots of DIY projects. So it'd be another good investment if you're planning on making lots of necks, and you'll definitely find other uses for this tool in your shop, so it's worth getting. And since this fret wire is already cut into 8-inch lengths, I just try to be extra cautious to use every bit of it that I can. So I will kind of like go up and down the neck and try to fit where my last pieces are going to fit best. That way I can make the most use of it. And as you can see, as I'm cutting them, I just leave them in their spot until it's time to glue and press them in. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the rest of these, and then I'll show you how I glue and press them in. And I forgot to mention, one of these packs of fret wire costs about 19 bucks, and it's way more than enough to do one neck. It's about a neck and a third. So now I'm going to show you how I press in my frets. And I mentioned earlier that I do like to glue my frets in. So I usually put a coat of shellac at least on the fingerboard, if not the entire neck like I did on this neck. And that just makes it easier to clean up any glue that squeezes out. And it also prevents the glue from soaking into the fingerboard and drying and preventing, the fingerboard from taking a finish that we put on it later. So as you can see, I went ahead and put a dab of glue just on top of a cup here. And because I only use a little tiny bit, and I just take my fret and I just drag it across that dab of glue. And so I believe this is my third fret. Just going to line up the tang all the way across. That looks good. So then you don't want to use a steel hammer because that will for sure mess up your fret. But you don't need a brass fret hammer. One of these little like plastic mallets that you can get, again, from Walmart, see, Hyper Tough brand, again, just a few bucks, will do just fine. The biggest thing is you want to make sure your neck is adequately supported. You don't want to hammer down and cause this to bend as it goes in. You'll damage your neck and you won't get your fret to press in properly. So what I do is I just move the end to the very edge of my workbench so that it's supported directly underneath the fret. And so I usually hold with one finger on this side, give it a little tap in on one side, and then same thing on the other side. Give it a little tap on the other side, just so that both ends seat in, and then you can give it a really good whack to seat it all the way down. No problem. And you can see a little bit of glue squeezed out. Totally fine. Just take our paper towel and wipe that right clean off. And perfect. We have a perfectly seated fret. So that's how you can do it with a hammer, but I actually have a method of doing this that I like even better. And basically I made my own fret call out of my radius blocks. I said earlier in the video that I could show you how you could get a little more money out of this. Well, let's head over to my drill press and I'll show you what I mean. And you may have already seen this little hack when I made my video on how I fixed a twisted import neck. And basically I just cut off a chunk of this radius block and just turned it into a little like jig for using my drill press as a fret call. And then I just use the other piece of the radius block underneath it with just a little piece of cloth to support the neck as we go all the way across the neck. And this method is awesome because, you're literally using your same sanding block that you use for your radius, and it just ensures that your frets stay at that perfect radius as well. So now we have all 24 of our frets pressed in, and except for I don't have my 0 fret pressed in yet. I'm going to do that after I do all the fret work, just because I want that one to sit just a little bit taller than the rest of them. Now we're just gonna drill and install fret dots, easy peasy, no special tools for this. Drop a super glue. And again, this is where it's nice to have some flush cutters, not necessary, but definitely helpful. The next thing we need to address is the really sharp ends of these frets. And to do that, I'm gonna use a special luthier tool. This is a 6-inch fret file. This is actually a tool that was made for me by my buddy Sean. Really appreciate it. And this is a tool that StewMac would charge you like $60 or $70 for. And it's basically just a file glued onto a piece of wood. And so you don't even need this. You can just use a regular file. And I've done this before. And so what you do is you just put your neck on the edge of your workbench and then hold this at an angle like this. And then just make sure you press down with your thumb so that you keep it a consistent angle all the way across, and just drag it towards you. And that's going to put like an 60 or 80 degree angle on the ends of our frets. And it's going to fit them flush with the edge of our neck. And that already feels 1,000 times better. I can run my hand across it. It's still not ideal, but I couldn't even run my hand across it before. But one of these does make it easier. So if you do have a spare file, you may as well make one of these if you're going to be doing it more than once, because having something to hold on to definitely makes it a lot easier. And then you just do that to both sides. And then you're ready to do your actual fret work. Now, I am not going to show you how to do the fret work because I have so many videos on that already, especially ones where I talk about how you can make your own luthier tools for fret work. So I'm just going to go ahead and link that in an iCard, and we're going to skip ahead to installing this neck so we can see how it plays, so we can see if everything I told you is actually true or if I'm full of crap. All right, haven't done any fret work yet, but I went ahead and installed it on this base so that I could measure for my bridge installation. And then I was really hoping that I wouldn't need any nut or string retainer, just that my tuners would be lined up perfectly for my string spacing to center on my neck. And I was just a little bit off in some spots. So I've made some notes to make adjustments on my template that I'm going to make for building these in the future. But for now, to keep the strings properly spaced and centered, I'm going to need to install a nut. All right, guys, just to wrap up this video, I wanted to actually play on this neck so that you guys know that it is a good playing neck, so that you don't think that I'm just a total hack at this, even though I totally am. It's honestly lower than I like it as a bass player, but better to start low and come up. But it's extremely low, no fret buzz on anywhere on the neck. Yeah, any fret buzz you heard in there was just poor technique. So yeah, it plays perfect. As far as it being a fast neck, you know, with the texturing on the back, I mean, it's faster than I am, that's for sure. So I don't know how you gauge. But it's, you know, it's a nice satin finish, so it does play nice and fast. I don't think the texturing slows you down at all. It is really nice to feel that extra texture once you get up into the higher frets there. I'm not sure how I feel about it personally, but I could see it being something that people really like. As a builder, I don't think it's worth all the extra effort unless I program the CNC machine to do the texturing. I know I'm kind of tooting my own horn here, but it's by far the best neck that I've built. I've only built a handful of necks, but it's 1,000 times better than the neck that we copied in this video. So that's awesome. As far as intonation goes, I always get nervous, especially with multiscale, but the multiscale.info website really takes all the guesswork out of that. So it intonates. I mean, it's just perfect. Perfect tuning. This bass is perfect and ready to ship. And finally, I have one bass done from this round of custom orders, and I'm very excited to send this one out. So if you haven't seen it already, I made this bass cab myself, and I have a video on how I did it for less than you can buy a bass cab. So definitely worth checking out that video next if you haven't seen it already. And lots of people have asked me if the truck bed liner coating has held up well on this thing. And this thing's gotten kicked around in the garage over the last year, and it still looks awesome. It's holding up real well. So check out that video. I'm Dan, this is Guns and Guitars, and I'll see you in that next video.